Hello, everybody. This is Mr. Kim, and College Board has finally released the October 2023 SAT test, albeit it's only the web version, so you won't see the traditional the formula sheets and things like that. But we can still go over the questions and then see what's to be really expected in the future. Now, starting in the year 2024, everything will be virtual, which means there is no longer going to be a paper and pencil test. Everything's going to be online. But the questions we can kind of expect to be about the same thing. So without any further ado, let's start with number one that you see on the screen here. So we're given an exponential graph, and it seems like it's a decay model. According to the graph, at 5 hours, at which of the following is closest to the mass? I mean, that's just a no-brainer right here. So it's just at 5, you're just going to look at 40, and then so you're just going to pick 40, which is this one. So it's C. Number two, what is the positive solutions to the given equation? The positive solution usually for an absolute value is just you can just take this and solve for x directly and subtract 3 on both sides. You get x equals 3. The other negative solution will be when x plus 3 equals negative 6, which that will lead you to x equals negative 9. Just a food for thought, but make sure that you're able to solve for absolute values by just drawing out these two branches, the positive and the negative versions, and then you should be able to solve it that way. Now, the next one, what is the graph of the following equation? We're starting with the y-intercept of 4 and the slope is -1. In other words, we are looking for the y-intercept of positive 4, which already eliminates C and D right out of the way because their y-intercept is -4. And the one that has a negative slope is B. So here we go. How do I know it has a negative slope? It's going down. It's not going up. This is a positive slope, and this is a negative slope. So therefore, it's got to be B. Number 4, what is the solution to the given system of equations? I have some kids who do this by plugging these choices in. The best case scenario for this is to really just plug this in as a substitution problem. So I'm going to just show you the way that I would have done if I was doing the test. So even though that doesn't look ideal, we're still going to use substitution to solve for the systems. Distribute -28 plus 16x, 15x equals 3. Then you get 31x combining like terms equals 3 plus 28 plus 28. 31x equals 31, x equals 1. So that eliminates B and A because x equals 1 is only possible for C and D. And if you plug this into the first equation, 7 minus 4 times 1, well, that gives me y value of 3. So it has to be C for this one. Number 5, in which graph does the shaded region represent all solutions? Okay, so we have two equations. One is +2, the other one is a little bit more flat. So I'm assuming that these two lines that's present for all the choices are the slope of 2 and slope of 0.5. But let's kind of narrow down our options. Let's take a look at the very first one. The slope of 2 is the one that's much more slanted than the other. The one that's more flat being the 0.5. Now it says y is less than 2x plus 3. Less than means you shade down. So if you're shading down, it means that you're supposed to be shading down like this. A makes no sense because the shade is actually going up from that line. This shading has to be downward, so C is also out. Notice how this part and this part is below that red line that I just highlighted. So if I were to just bolden this just to re-emphasize the line, that's the slope of 2x. The y-intercept of +3, yeah, and they're both shaded downwards. So I'm only really going to be choosing between B and D. The other one that says y is greater than or equal to 0.5x minus 6, well, that's greater than. So which one represents the one that has the greater than? That's shading upwards. So it has to be shaded upwards from the blue line. So the only one that matches and is the area is kind of overlapping is B. That's the only one. Here, if it was less than that slope, that equation, then it would have been D, but that's not the case. So the letter choice here would be B. Moving on, number 6. According to the function, by how many millions of metric tons did the annual world-wide production of avocados increase from 2010 to 2011? So we're talking about how much did it increase over the period of time. Sounds awful lot like rise over run to me, which awful lot like sounds like the slope. Because 2010 to 2011 means the year has passed by 1. So your run is just 1. How much did it increase in terms of rise? That's your slope, 0.17. And honestly, there's really not much to say about number 6 other than that. Number 7, which equation has no solution? No solution means you have the same slope, different y-intercept. Or you can just kind of go through these choices and then solve one by one, but no one really has time for that. But I can already tell right away that this one will give you 4x on the left. This only has x, so A and B is not the case. It has to have the same slope. This one has a slope of 4 and this one has a slope of 1. Now, C has the same slope, but it also has the same y-intercept, because if you distribute the 4 to both x plus 1, you get 4x plus 4 equals 4x plus 4, essentially, which is called infinite solutions. We don't want that. So the only answer that's left is D. Number 8, the function is defined by, okay, all that stuff. Which of the following is not an x-intercept? Okay, so what do we have here? X minus 1, x plus 1, and x plus 2. That means x equals 1, x equals negative 1, x equals negative 2. A quick way to just think about this, switch the signs, please. Switch the signs and get the x-intercepts, 1, negative 1, and negative 2. So 1, negative 1, negative 2. All of these are possible zeros, not D. Which expression is equivalent to, okay, 16 to the power 1/2 x. 16 the last time I checked was 4 squared. The reason why I want to do that is because the 2 along with the 1/2, they nicely cancel each other out. So that's another way to look at it. Or if you want to think of it this way, 16 to the power 1/2 x, you can just write a parentheses around like that and can separate between the half and the x. 16 to the power 1/2 is essentially the same thing as saying square root of 16. So that's a 4. The final answer is 4 to the power of x. You just put the x right next to it that comes after here. Number 10, trapezoid question. A, B, C, D is similar. You know, I always tell my students this, but anytime they give you a geometry question, just please draw. Having a figure and not having a figure makes a huge difference. You know, I'm not a fantastic drawer, but I'll do my best. PQRS. So something similar means one is bigger than the other. The length of each side of trapezoid PQRS is 3 times the length. So if this was x, then that'll be 3x. The area of a trapezoid ABCD is 6 square centimeters. Okay, what is the area in square centimeters of trapezoid? Here's a really nice thing to note. If the ratio of sides is 1 to 3, essentially, ratio of area is 1 to 9. How do I know that? Because it's a quadrilateral in which you're going to have your side length tripled and your height being tripled. So essentially what you're doing is, if you think of it as a rectangle, like I can give an example with a square because that will probably be a lot easier. A square of 1 to 1 and a square of 3 to 3. Notice how the area of this is 1 and the area of this is 9. So the ratio of the area is always going to be the ratio of sides squared, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're multiplying one side and the other side, so you're doing it twice. So you're squaring. So if area of the ratio of the area is 1 to 9, one of the area is 6, the other one has to be 54. 6 times 9 has to be 54. So that's the answer here for number 10. Number 11, okay, so we have this one here. We are in a vertex form, which means we can tell the vertex is -1, -9. If you need to write this down, please go ahead. The vertex form follows this. H, K is your vertex. You always just have to switch the sign for the H, and that's pretty much one thing you really need to remember. Okay, so I have my vertex. So what's the big deal now? I want an equation that has no x-intercepts, okay? Again, to give you a little bit of a visual, that's -1, -9, and it's going to be a concave up graph because it's a positive x squared when you FOIL this out. When you have a quadratic graph that looks like this, and I want to make sure I have no x-intercepts, it means that literally this entire graph has to be shifted up by more than 9. Because if you shift this graph up by more than 9, now what you're going to get is something that looks like this, which will never cross the x-axis. And that's what we want when we want to say having no x-intercepts. So if I want to move something up by more than 9, you're not doing the graph transformations of A and B. This is to the left or to the right. The A is moving right by 2 and B is moving left by 2, following the rules of graph transformations. and C is making it worse by moving it down by 11. So the only answer here is D. I want to move the entire quadratic graph up by 9. Again, drawing this, having the visual really, really helps for this question. And yeah, that should be D. Number 12, the graph of the given equation is a circle. What is the area of the circle? Complete the square, please. The circle equation always must follow this, where h comma k is your center, r is the radius. Now, what you will see is that you have the sort of like the prerequisites for the x minus h squared and y minus k squared, but it's not completely in that squared format. Therefore, we do this thing called completing the square. X squared minus 10x, if you remember the steps, you always take a look at the b value and go, b divided by 2, and you square it. So negative 10 divided by 2 and you square that, that gives you 25, which means you're going to add 25 onto this, factor that to negative x minus 5 squared. So we completed the square for the x's. Do the same thing for the y's here, plus y squared minus 6y, half b squared, you should get plus 9. Negative 6 over 2 squared should give you a 9 here. And then that should give you 30. But don't forget, you added essentially 25 and 9 on the left-hand side of the equation. So you also must add that to the right-hand side of the equation as well. Plus y minus 3 squared is equal to, what is that, 64? So center is 5 comma 3, radius is 8. We don't really care about the center, do we? Because the radius is here is 8. Circle equation, pi r squared for the area, 64 pi. The given expression can be rewritten as a plus 20 over x plus 5. Okay, so this is nothing more than a long division problem. This is going to be our remainder. How do I know that? Because it's over our divisors, and usually when you do a polynomial division, we write expressions of the remainder that way. So we're going to do long division with this. Then how many times can x fit in x squared? X times x squared plus 5x. Make sure you distribute the 5 to that as well. Make sure you subtract. Cancel those out. X minus 5x gives you negative 4x. So then negative 4 fits in there. Negative 4x minus 20. Subtract them. Distribute the negative. That's where the plus 20 came from as our remainder. Our quotient, therefore, will be x minus 4. Number 14, an electric circuit contains 3 capacitors, blah, 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 blah. All right, so we want to just solve for C. What I've seen kids do for this is that they just kind of thought of this as a really simple question and picked A, which is the most lazy answer I could probably think of. Because like, oh, you know, I can just swap top and bottom, and then, you know, it's C over 1 equals D over 1 plus E over 1 plus F over 1, which is just complete nonsense here. So let's not do that. Anytime when you're given a fraction like this, please make sure you understand that the first and foremost step is always common denominator. Having 3 separate denominators, trying to find the common denominator to that, I know it's going to be annoying, but there's no way around it. So the common denominator obviously is going to be DEF, which means the first one, this has to be multiplied by EF because D is already there. This one has to be multiplied by DF because E is already there. And for this one, you guessed it, it's DE because F is already there. So EF plus DF plus DE is equal to 1 over C. And now what you can do is you can flip top and bottom. Or you can cross multiply and, you know, divide other side by whatever. But at this point in stage, if there's a fraction equals to a fraction, then you can flip those two. So the correct answer here should be DEF over this weird looking thing. So the only answer that gives you that is D. Next question. All right, number 15. The cost of renting bicycle is $8 for the first hour plus 4 for each additional hour. All right, that already gives me the slope. How do I know that? Each additional hour per hour, for each, every, per. This is all related to slope. So anytime you see that, okay, that's my slope. $4 for each additional hour. And it says that it's $8 for the first hour. So a lot of students, what I found out was that they picked C. 8 is initial, 4 is the slope, and they just put that down and just move on. Which is the common mistake that you can make, because what you actually forgot to realize was that $8 is for the first hour, not for time 0. So if you actually put this in, when h is 1, h of t, or maybe I should write down t for this because that's the independent variable. That's 8. When time is 2, it's 12. When time is 3, it's 16. It's keep on getting added by $4 each hour. So in other words, if you want to find out t is equal to 0, because that's the y-intercept, maybe I should bring this up a little bit more, and t, h of t, and I want to find out when t is 0, that means that your y-intercept has to be 4 following that pattern. So unfortunately, the correct answer here should be D. Or if the table is just too much work for you guys, then perhaps you can think of it this way. It's $8 for the first hour plus $4 for each additional hour, but you have to subtract one of the hours because this already accounts for one hour. So you can do t minus 1. Maybe I should have wrote down h not to confuse you guys, but just think of t as time. You need to subtract one of those hours away because 8 already accounts for that. And when you actually solve this out, you get 4t minus 4. 8 minus 4 gives you 4 as your y-intercept. So again, it's either the way that you're supposed to do, use the table, use the equation, do whatever you prefer, but that's the way to do it. All right, now number 16, we're opening, actually we're going on to the grid-in section, the open-ended section. What value of r? Usually the first one is always so simple. I mean, 5r equals 3r plus 3. I strongly doubt any of you guys will get this one wrong, but it's an algebra question, but show your work and make sure you don't make silly mistakes. That's the worst way. Distribute the 3. I guess that's the only possible mistake you could possibly make. Subtract 3 on both sides and get 2r and all the good stuff. Divide by 2. Yeah. What is the positive solution to the given equation? All right. So I had seen some students who actually do this. All right. Which I don't like. It's okay, but I wouldn't do that. I would just consider this as a quadratic expression and consider 3x as a variable. Like call this gigantic thing as capital A, like make a substitution. Then you do a squared minus 4a minus 12, which makes factoring a lot easier. What two numbers multiplies to give you negative 12 but adds to give you negative 4? Let's see. Negative 6 and positive 2, right? So a minus 6, a plus 2, you get a equals 6, a equals negative 2. Then you substitute this back in there, and you get 3x equals 6 and 3x equals negative 2. Divide by 3, you get a positive solution of 2. No need to consider that because it's going to give you a negative solution anyways. Now, if you were here, it's okay, but you better factor out the 3 because that will make your factoring a lot easier. But even then, you have this stupid 3x in the front. The 3 in the front actually makes factoring just a tad bit more challenging to do. So if that's your cup of tea, go for it. If not, I strongly recommend you to just make a substitution. I know you notice that 3x is common thing. Just call it like a regular letter and then just resubstitute back in after you do your easy factorization. The harder factorization would be the 3x squared minus 4x minus 4. Still doable, but not as obvious. But you will get this with the 3 in the front, x equals 2, x equals negative 2 over 3. So you still get 2, except that you just have to probably sit there and then try to figure out how to factor the 3x squared minus 4x minus 4. All right, number 18. Line K is shown in the xy plane. Line J not shown as perpendicular. Okay, let's highlight that. Negative reciprocal slope. Parallel slope is always the same. We did that in the previous multiple choice question. Perpendicular means you have a negative reciprocal slope. So if you find the slope of this, and they were nice enough to give you those really nice, lovely 2 points, which are x and y intercepts, respectively, and that's 2 units down, and that's what, 5 units to the right. So the slope for this is 2 over 5 negative because it's going downwards. Now, perpendicular slope to that is a negative reciprocal version of that. So you flip it 5 over 2, and then you have to undo the negative because if you have a negative sign in front of another negative sign, makes it a positive. So the slope is just 5 over 2. Easy. Number 19. K is constant, y-intercept of 0, 2. All right, so if they gave you that as a point, plug it in, please. That's the tactic. So there's really not much you can do other than just plug things in. So that's your y, that's your x. Let's plug it in. So y is 2 equals negative 14 times 1/2 to the power of 2 plus k. And notice how k is the only thing that's left remaining after you plug everything in. 1/2 squared is 1 over 4 times negative 14 equals 2 plus k. Now, if you do this, negative 14 over 4, you have to be really good at reducing fractions. That's something you must practice. And then this one, you can't use a calculator for it, but you're going to add the 7 over 2 on both sides. So k is equal to 2 plus 7 over 2. That's 4 over 2 if you get the common denominator. So k equals 11 over 2 as your final answer. Again, plug it in. And the rest of it is simple computation arithmetic. Probably mistake you could make is in the arithmetic, you forgot the negative sign, you forgot to, move it to the other side and those type of things. Okay, so make sure you know how to multiply fractions with integers and do the arithmetic correctly. Last question of section 3. The perimeter of a square is inscribed in a circle. So the picture looks like this. A square is in a circle. All right, so that's what it's supposed to look like. And the perimeter of the square is 30 inches. Okay, so if perimeter of the square is 30, that means each of the side length has to be 30 divided by 4 because each of the side lengths are going to be equal to one another. So that's essentially 15 over 2. So I'm just going to label as 7.5 each. Or you could label as 15 over 2. It doesn't really matter. The radius of the circle is x root 2. What is the value of x? When I taught this to some of my students, what they decided to do was they put the center here and then they go like this. And then then they get stuck because they try to figure what this is. And then they know that this is going to be like 7.5 divided by 2 again. And it just creates a whole lot of mess. Anytime when there's like a square inside a circle, don't draw the radius like that because a radius is from the center to any outskirts of the circle. As long as it's on the outskirt of the circle, you're fine, right? So why not go like this? Because not only does it meet on the circle, it also meets on the corner of the square. And when you draw it out like this, now what you suddenly have is from a square circle question into a really nice triangle question. And they say literally the radius of the circle is x root 2. That's the goal. We want to solve for x. But let's kind of take a look at this blue triangle and let's figure out what's going on. So we have 7.5 and 7.5. This is a square. Essentially what we have is a 90 degrees here, and this is cutting it into half of 90, 45, 45. That's a special right triangle. Recall the properties, which you will be given in the formula. It's x root 2 for 45, 45, 90 degrees. So if each of these x's were 7.5, it's a no-brainer then that this length over here will be 7.5 square root of 2. Just put square root of 2 next to the 7.5. That's all you got to do. So if this entire thing is 7.5 square root of 2, all you have to do then to find out the radius, because what we have essentially found was the diameter of this circle. So we're going to take 7.5 square root of 2, which is the diameter. To find the radius, all you got to do is take that 7.5 square root of 2 and then divide it by 2 yet again. So that will be 7.5 over 2 square root of 2. Maybe I should have left it in a fraction because remember the grid only has 4 spaces. So I won't be able to do 7.5 divided by 2. That would require you to get 5 spaces. So unfortunately, we will have to stick with the fraction. That would be, this is same thing as saying 15 over 2. And then when you put that over 2 once more, you should get 15 over 4. So my final correct answer here should be 15/4. bubble in, or in year 2024, I don't know how they're going to make you do that, but type it in, I guess, 15/4, and you should be good with that. All right, so that summarizes the review portion of section 3 of the non-calculator section. Hope this helped in understanding like what to do for certain questions. I think probably the hardest question is, obviously like the last couple of them, especially this. I think a lot of kids will get this one wrong because they just simply blindly assume 8 is the y-intercept. That's the most common mistake I've seen. 14 also. Those are the most commonly occurring mistakes from what I have observed. Watch out for those, common denominators and all that good stuff. And on the next video, I will go over the calculator section.